Let's talk about Gary Lineker. Gary Lineker, it emerged yesterday. It will be leaving the BBC. As far as I can work out, he's going to do Match of the Day for the rest of this season and will leave the BBC after the 2026 World Cup. After, shall we say, a fractious relationship. He's been there 25, 26 years. And for much of that time, my next guest was with him. A BBC legend in himself, Match of the Day legend, and also Football Focus legend, and a great footballer he was too for Liverpool. Welcome to the show, Mark Lawrenson. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Pleasure, Kevin.
Now, your take on this. Now, you know what, Talk, my station, we've got our political differences with Gary Lineker. He's entitled to his views. I don't agree with him, but I think he's a very good football presenter. He knows his stuff. But let me ask you first, before we get into the qualities of Gary and why he's going. What I wanted to discuss with you is who you think might replace him, because my bet is the BBC will already be thinking, what woman can we get to host Match of the Day? Would you agree with that?
Quite possibly. I think Mark Chapman should get it. He already does Match of the Day on the Sunday, Match of the Day 2, and works for Radio 5 as well. And he's a consummate performer. He's really, really good. And I think that's the only replacement for me, as far as I'm concerned, for Gary, unless they go to somebody from Sky. But I don't see that happening. But as you touch on there, Kevin, it could be anybody. I think there's a new head of sport at the BBC as well. So maybe he wants to make a statement, which is we're going to have a lady in charge of Match of the Day. Match of the Day 1 and Match of the Day 2, I'm not sure.
It seems to me that every time there's a sort of sports presenter's job going on the BBC, that if you happen to be a sort of white middle-aged guy, you're going to be last in line. I mean, you know, as a fan of your work, Mark, I still don't know why you had to go. But you mentioned quite rightly, could it be that you were a white guy in your 60s?
I couldn't possibly comment, as I'm sure you can imagine, but of course it was. I said it at the time, and I think. And I thought I'd back that up by saying, look, it doesn't matter how old you are, or up to a certain degree how you look. If you know about what you're talking about, then on you go. And I think the problem, the thing that miffed me was the fact that the audiences were going up and up and up, but that didn't make any difference. I think obviously I was mentioned in a meeting, and they said, look, he is what he is. Let's get somebody else in, and it's happened. But I've got over it now. Only took me about 5 years.
Well, you know, Football Focus, you know, I don't want to point the finger at anybody, but, you know, it is now hosted by a woman, very nice lady, Alex Scott. But there's no getting away from the fact that while she's been presenting it, it's not all her fault. Some of the content, I think, is dubious. But, I mean, the ratings have absolutely plummeted, you know, and I would suggest it's like, when I tune into Football Focus, I'm not having a go at women's football or anything like this, but when I tune into Football Focus, do I really want to know how Wheatstone ladies are doing this week? Do you know what I mean? The content is all wrong.
Yeah, well, they're not far from talking about the inside of a ping pong ball sometimes, to be honest with you. But I mean, the thing about it is that there's so much competition now at 12 o'clock on a Saturday, and this programme has always really been a magazine-y type programme, even more so now, because there seems to be less football actually talked in the 45 minutes, however long it is, than there used to be. So I think they're up against lots of different things as well. But look, you know, people make a decision. You turn over if you don't like it. It's the way of the world, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's talk about Gary now. As I say, you know, a great football presenter, great TV presenter. I suggest, you know, I mean, we know about some of the other problems he's had, you know, with his tweeting and his political stance. But both the BBC and him seem to be over those troubles. I would suggest that the reason he's going now is the same reason that you found yourself having to go, that the BBC has got this real problem with white blokes in their 60s. He's too old and he's too white.
Yeah, well, quite possibly. Only he would know. And again, you know, I mean, if you think about Gary, he was thrown into the position with Match of the Day because Des Lynam cleared off to ITV, and good luck to Des, he was an absolute brilliant guy as well. So, and when Gary first started, for a while, it was difficult for him. He would tell you that, but I mean, he's absolutely seamless. I can't remember last time the fella made a mistake, and that's the thing. You know, he doesn't make any mistakes. The programme is so smooth, gets on the right times, gets off at the right times. The quality obviously is due to the games. He always has a couple of little gags or you know, something funny in there. And I just really do not get it. I mean, I just hope that's not the case, because what's it all coming to?
Well, I mean, it's not just men. I mean, the BBC, is often accused of being somewhat ageist. It doesn't like people once they turn 60. But I do think Lineker, as a sports presenter and a football expert, I mean, I wouldn't be so keen to get rid of him if I was the BBC. I think he'll be a great loss, don't you?
Well, yeah, unless, I mean, I think there's a new head of sport, so unless he's been told to cut the money, the budget, which would not be a surprise whatsoever. So I think supposedly Gary's on 1.2 or 1.3, so maybe they think they might get someone for 750 quid, 750 quid. Yeah. So that may well be the case, but it's not the place that it used to be, is it? I think everybody knows that.
Yeah. Did you find towards the end of your tenure? When did you go? 2022 was it? Were you finding it a difficult place to be? Because
yeah, I felt like I was going in and doing, obviously, the Saturday lunchtime programme, and it just didn't do anything for me, whereas I used to really enjoy it. But look, it was what it was, and it was very, very enjoyable for the time. I mean, one of the reasons I got a phone call, I think it was in March, and my contract was up at the end of the season, so sort of June-ish time, and I got a phone call, and this guy from the BBC said to me, "Look, Laro," he said, "we're thinking of taking the programme on the road." And I went, "All right, okay." And he said, you won't want to do that, will you? You won't want to do that, will you? And I said, "Well, it sounds like I'm not going." And just when you get stuff like that, you think, you know what? Time to go. Yeah. Say goodbye and clear off. Yeah. Have a look, thank everyone, and go off into the sunset.
Yeah, I've had a few of those calls myself in my so-called career, when the worst thing you want to hear at the beginning of these conversations is, "Hey, Kev, we're thinking of taking the show in a different direction," and that means in a direction that doesn't include you.
Listen, Kevin, can I tell you very quickly? One of the big chiefs at Match of the Day as well invited me to lunch. This was before I got the other shouts. Invited me to lunch and said, "Oh, I'm so looking forward to you. You know, come and have lunch to me." He ate me meal. He gave me some bad news, and he actually said, "You're not eating that?" And I went, "No, I don't feel like eating that, because obviously you give me some more bad news. Do you mind if I have it?" And I went, "No, go on, help yourself."
Typical. Just a couple of memories of Lineker. Did you find him a great guy to work with?
Yeah, very, very, very easy. I mean, it's the same thought process. With Hansen was there as well, wasn't it? And I'm not saying it because we're on it, but it was genuinely absolutely smooth. But that was also the backroom people around it. It was an iconic, well, still is an iconic programme. And I don't know many people who like football or even sport who've never, ever seen Match of the Day. I think nearly half the world's seen it.
Let me ask you this. Do you, and again, I'm not having a go at women's football, but I do think it's kind of different. You know, are women qualified to talk about men's football with the same knowledge as, say, someone like you or Gary Lineker?
Well, they won't have played in World Cups, will they? And they won't have played in you know the top games in Europe the way that men do. My only problem with that, and I think actually one or two of the girls are very, very good co-commentary, very, very good. But the problem is that there are now so many of them now. They're actually flooded with them, and so the girls can commentate on all the men's games, but the men can't commentate on the women's games generally. Which what's all that about?
Well, that's the BBC for you, and other channels, to be fair. Like I said at the beginning of our conversation, Mark, that when you see that there's a sports presenting vacancy going on the telly on any of the channels, the first thing you think is, I wonder which woman will get that job. It's a kind of, I think women should be considered in the same frame as men, but that's fair enough, level playing field, but it isn't at the moment. They are prioritising women for some reason, aren't they?
Well, it's two completely different games, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is completely different games, and women's football has started to get much, much better, as we know. But in comparison to men's football, it's just completely different. Yeah. Everything about it.
It really is. What are you up to these days then, Mark?
Talking rubbish like this occasionally.
This is not rubbish. This is excellent. Sorry.
I'm talking about me, not you. Yeah. And talking rubbish and other stuff. Work a bit for Paddy Power, who, by the way, one of the best companies you can ever work for. They're great fun. And they invite us to Cheltenham, which is even better.
Excellent. All right, listen, Mark. Well, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. You're always welcome on this show, I'll tell you. Mark Lawrenson, the great former Match of the Day pundit and Football Focus, great Liverpool player as well, knows his stuff.